Hello and welcome to the third video in the series Developing with Portofino 5. In this video, we'll look at persistence in Portofino applications in a greater detail. In the context of a Portofino application, persistence means the storage of the application's data on a relational database. And in particular, Portofino uses a library called Hibernate to achieve that. This is a library which is pretty popular in the Java ecosystem, and you may already have heard about it. Now we won't be looking at Hibernate in detail, but it's useful to know about it because this means that Portofino is extremely portable across database implementations, and also the use of Hibernate will surface from time to time for us as Portofino users. So as in the previous videos, we're continuing to build our application that started from running the wizard, and we'll now go into the administration section to look at what the wizard created in a bit more detail. When we run the wizard, it basically creates two aspects of the application. One is the model and the other is the pages. The model that we can see here in the tables section is a representation of the structure of the database. So it's it can show us what Portofino knows about the database. So in this case, we have a database connection called demo, which has a few schemas in it. And in particular, the TT schema is the one that we've built our application on. And we can see that it contains a number of tables. We can also search by name, for example, users. And each table has some details, in particular a list of columns, each with a type, and we can see that this model reflects the structure of the database. But it's also important to notice that the model is not just a one-to-one copy of the structure of the database, but it's annotated with extra information that Portofino uses to drive the construction of the application. So for example, here we can see that for each column we also have a class or a type that we use to represent the values of this column in the application, which is of course, which uses Java types and not the database native types. So we can see that the model is contains both, let's say, physical information about the structure of the database and is annotated with extra logical information or metadata, which is additional data which is not tied to the database, but which is used to drive the creation of the application. And should we change something in the database, for example, adding a table or deleting a column, we would have to update the model so that Portofino knows about our change. And to do this, we go into the connections panel page. We click on the connection, and here we can click synchronize, and the Portofino, the application, will read the structure of the database again and update the model, and it will keep all the annotations that we've put on it. So for example, here, if we change the type, for example, of a column, and we later synchronize the model, Portofino will remember about the type that we've set. So here we can find that password is still Boolean, and now we'll restore it to string. So this is the first part of what the wizard generates. So the representation of the structure of the database. Then the wizard also generates pages that read this model and perform logic based on it. So here we'll proceed to creating a page just like the wizard would do. So we'll see how it works under the hood. We should note that in the context of Portofino, when we have a page, we actually have two different components. One is the page proper, which is the client-side user interface page that shows the data and allows us to interact with the system. But then each page is backed by a server-side resource which accesses the database. And when we create a page in Portofino, either through the wizard or through the user interface as we're doing now, we're actually creating both components. So we're creating a client-side page and a server-side resource. In this case, we'll create a page that will read from the users table. The type is a CRUD page, which is a type of page that is used to access a database table. We'll call this users with an exclamation mark, and we'll give it an icon. So here Portofino has created our new page, but if we try to access it, we see this page is not configured correctly. What does it mean? Well, if we go into its configuration, we see that everything is blank, and since this page revolves around a table, we have to tell it which table. So here we select the database connection, and we only have one in this case. And here we write a query, because CRUD page insists on a table, but it can show a subset of the data in the table. So it's actually it revolves around a query. So here we write a query in a query language, which resembles SQL for those who are familiar with a relational database, but it's a language that is only related to SQL. It's a query language called S.r.l, and it's the Hibernate query language, which is a bit more high level than SQL. And in particular, where SQL deals with tables and columns, S.r.l deals with objects and properties. So here we can write simply from users, and this in S.r.l is equivalent to select u from users u. We always have to give tables an alias, but we can simply write from users. Now if we save this information, we can see that the page is no longer broken. It's showing some data, but it's only showing some IDs. And why is that? Because in its configuration, we have to choose which properties or columns are visible and which we can insert and which we can update. So for example, we might decide to show in the results, in the search results, we might decide to show email, first name and last name. And we can see that Portofino automatically computes some labels for the columns derived from the name of the column, trying to making them more user friendly. But we can also write our label here. For example, we might want to call surname the last name. So here we see surname. We can also choose which properties are searchable. For example, we might want to search users by email, so we select searchable here, and if there are searchable properties, a search panel appears, and we can choose which properties to search for. So for example, here we may want to search all emails that contain the letter A. Well, all have it because they have example, but for example AD, and we'll see only admin. Same thing goes for inserting and updating values. So for example, here, if I check these insertable boxes, the create new user form will show those properties that I can insert. Now I'm not inserting a user because it requires a bunch of data that we cannot provide, but you get the idea. And similarly, if we want to edit a user, we see that we only see the properties that we've marked as active, but we cannot edit any of them. And that's because they're enabled, but they're not updatable. So if we mark them as updatable, then we can change them. And here we can see the changed surname. This CRUD page is packed with features. We get the search. We can refresh the search. We can sort the results, and we also have pagination. Here the page is showing 10 items per page, which is the default. But here we can, for example, say that the CRUD page is to show just 2 rows per page, and so here we'll see only 2 results, and we'll be able to navigate page by page. So this is pretty flexible. So that's it about the CRUD page. You can explore and experiment, and you can also play with annotations in the model to look at the possibilities. For example, we can mark a password field as a password. Here we have a password column that is not marked as a password. So when we enable it, we see its content. Of course, it's hashed in the database, but we may want to hide it. So for example, here, if we go to the users table and to the password column, we can, for example, tell the system that this is a password, and all the CRUD pages that refer to that column will now show it as a password. So for example, here it's dotted out, and there are other kinds of annotations. For example, we can say that the given field is an email or some other kinds of codes that we might want to validate or encrypt. And we can say that, for example, a field can span multiple lines, or it can contain rich text, that is HTML text, and so on. There are several possibilities. They also depend on the type of column. For example, these were all strings, but here in this column, which is a date, we have other kinds of annotations, and this is out of the scope of this video. But so for now, we've given an introduction about persistence that hopefully showcases some of the capabilities of Portofino, and in later videos we'll delve deeper into this topic. Thanks for watching.